It began as just another mission. Routine, predictable, even exciting in a sterile scientific sense. The experimental probe, Kronos 12, was launched with one simple goal: to study a dormant black hole on the outskirts of the galaxy, near the heart of the Sagittarius cluster. The black hole, a relatively quiet one, had long been a subject of observation. Not much was known about it, except that it had remained dormant for millennia. Its mass was unremarkable compared to the giants like Sagittarius A*, but it was still powerful enough to warrant attention. The plan was straightforward. Launch Kronos 12, send it toward the black hole, and gather data on its gravitational effects, its Hawking radiation, and most importantly, its influence on the fabric of spacetime itself. Time dilation, a field known but barely understood. They had calculated everything: the trajectory, the speed, the passage of time. First, everything went as expected. The probe's instruments recorded normal data: gravitational waves, weak emissions of radiation, the steady compression of spacetime as the event horizon neared. 4 hours, it fell toward the black hole, gathering data and sending it back. But then, something happened. It was subtle at first, a shift in the data that seemed like a temporary glitch. The telemetry began to show something strange. The time dilation data was not simply recording the slow passage of time. It was reversing. Kronos 12 wasn't just slowing down, it was moving backward. The probe's sensors began recording earlier moments in its journey. Data that had already been transmitted, data that should have been replaced by new information. The readings weren't just out of sequence. They were unfolding in reverse. The scientists on Earth were baffled. At first, they thought it was a sensor malfunction, a glitch in the timestamping software. But as the probe drew closer to the event horizon, the phenomenon became undeniable. The data continued to reverse. Minutes passed, then hours. The readings from the probe became more erratic. The instruments weren't just recording light or radiation, they were replaying moments in time. It wasn't just a time lag, it was a time loop. And it was coming from within the black hole's influence. The probe's systems were designed to withstand extreme conditions. But this was outside any equation. Dr. Lena Kahn, the lead astrophysicist, sat in front of the array of monitors. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, her mind racing to calculate the anomaly. "No, this can't be happening," she whispered to herself as the data continued to loop. A pattern began to emerge in the replays, a recursive loop in time. The probe's mission logs, at first recorded with simple timestamps, now reflected moments that had already passed. The data wasn't just moving backward, it was rewriting itself. "The black hole isn't just bending time," Lena murmured to her team. "It's reversing it." It was a breakthrough, or perhaps it was a trap. Kronos 12 had crossed a line that, until now, had been theoretical. Every model, every simulation, every prediction had accounted for time slowing down near the event horizon. But none had predicted time reversal. As the probe neared the event horizon, the data became more erratic. The past was collapsing on itself. Kronos 12 systems began to malfunction. Its onboard clock was stuck, unable to properly track the passage of time. The probe sensors started to display moments from hours before. The telemetry was feeding itself into an infinite loop of repetition, a collapsing feedback loop. And then, as the probe passed just within the cusp of the event horizon, it transmitted one last message, its final transmission. It wasn't a flood of data. It wasn't a burst of radiation. It wasn't a technical report or final telemetry dump. It was a single word: cry. Help. The signal was brief, but it carried with it a weight that sent shockwaves through the team. Earth's communication systems were equipped to decode and transmit high-frequency signals, but this one was different. It wasn't a typical data burst or emergency ping. It was clear. A message from a place beyond understanding. It wasn't a message sent from within the black hole, but rather a remnant of the probe's existence, something left behind in its impossible journey through time. It was as if the probe had been caught in a paradox, trapped between the folds of time itself. And somehow, it had reached back through the loop to ask for help. But it was too late. As the probe's last transmission faded into the void, scientists on Earth scrambled to make sense of the data. But their calculations began to fall apart. They couldn't resolve the time loop anomaly. The data from the probe was being recorded at multiple points in time, all of them intersecting. The black hole, it seemed, was not just a point of no return. It was rewriting the probe's existence, erasing the boundaries between moments in time. What they were witnessing wasn't the slow fall of matter into a gravitational well. It was the unraveling of time itself. And at the heart of it all, the black hole wasn't just consuming the probe's data. It was consuming time. And it was asking, what happens when time itself is no longer fixed? The moment the final transmission from Kronos 12 was received, the excitement was palpable. Anomalies, yes, but they could be explained. They had no idea how wrong they were. The astrophysics team on Earth, led by Dr. Lina Khan, scrambled to decode the probe's data, still reverberating with its last cry for help. At first, it seemed like a technical malfunction, miscommunications, perhaps an error in timestamping. But when they began analyzing the telemetry logs in depth, the anomalies deepened. They weren't just glitches in the system. They weren't just misaligned data points. The probe's recorded movements, as it approached the event horizon, had begun to repeat themselves, but not in a way that could be attributed to standard orbital decay or measurement error. It was as if the probe had retraced its own steps, but with a delay. The trajectory was the same, but the sequence of events was not. It wasn't an overlap. It wasn't an accident. It was a loop. The deeper they dug into the data, the more it became clear. Kronos 12 wasn't just floating toward the black hole. It was looping through time. The black hole, it seemed, wasn't just a place of destruction. It was a gateway, but not for travel, not for passage. The black hole was recording, and not just any data. It was recording moments, not for eternity, not for eternity's sake, but for something more ancient, more intentional. It wasn't a matter of collecting matter. It was preserving time, a series of isolated events caught in the gravitational churn, replayed like the echo of a memory that refused to die. Dr. Khan theorized that the black hole wasn't simply consuming matter. It was holding on to it, trapping pieces of now and then, preserving fragments of past events to replay them endlessly. The more they analyzed the data, the clearer it became. The black hole wasn't just a death sentence for matter. It was a memory bank. As the data was being mapped into models, the anomalies began to reappear. Familiar images from the probe's surroundings. A broken star on the horizon. An artifact, pattern, each time the same but somehow different. The telescope's readings weren't just confirming data from Kronos 12's mission. They were repeating segments of time, the same moments from multiple angles, captured by the probe's sensors as though they were witnessing them again. They began seeing images of the probe itself in the background of its recordings, but not from its present, from before. In one video feed, Kronos 12 was captured in the distance, a perfect still image of its past position from 2 hours before it even reached that point in its journey. One engineer, Dr. Raj Patel, pushed the investigation further, using the probe's data to simulate what could be happening at the event horizon. What he saw wasn't just a time loop. It was more like a time loop layered upon itself, stacked like pages in a book that refused to turn. The simulations created gaps in time. Not holes, but blind spots. Places where information, seemingly intact, didn't line up. Memory, not of the probe, but of its environment, would repeat in places it shouldn't. Single moment, then another, and another. There were places where the space itself was collapsing into repetition. Images on the screen flickered like an old film reel, fast-forwarding to the past. Each snapshot was an echo of something already observed. It was no longer about interpreting data. It was about trying to escape it. The team soon realized they weren't just studying time. They were living in it. As Dr. Khan pored over the final records of the mission, she began to feel the subtle pressure of this looping effect. Conversations felt out of place. Repeating topics, repeating arguments, the same points, the same laughter. The research team was rehashing discussions, almost as if they had already had them a day before, and the data didn't just repeat, it imprinted itself into their cognition. They couldn't escape the feeling that they were experiencing things that had already occurred. Was it their imagination? Or had the black hole's memory begun to bend their minds? As the simulation models ran, they began to witness even more disturbing distortions. A message appeared in the data logs that should not have been there. Set of coordinates. Name. The team had never inputted them. Yet there they were. Coordinates for a location within the black hole's singularity. The lines began to blur. Where had the message come from? The past? The future? Was this just a glitch? Dr. Patel confirmed it wasn't. This was a direct response. From what? The black hole. The memory of the probe itself. The team's own actions had begun to feel scripted, as if each decision had already been made in some version of time that was playing out in parallel. Dr. Khan sat alone late one night, the stars outside blinking in their infinite dance. She began to feel an unsettling thought, one that had been lingering but never voiced. What if they were the ones trapped? Not the probe, not time, but them. What if the black hole wasn't just recording events, it was trapping the humans too, capturing them in the same loop, creating versions of their existence that repeated forever within the black hole's influence? What if, in some version of time, they had already lived this moment, and would continue to live it forever in some fractured repeating echo? Her hands shook as she reached for the console. There, in the logs, was the date, the same as when the anomaly had first been detected. A specific timestamp, the first pulse of data, a moment in time that kept appearing over and over again. And at that moment she understood. They weren't just studying the black hole's memory. They were living it. The first time Dr. Khan noticed the shift, it was subtle. A passing thought, like a breeze she couldn't catch. The room was quieter than usual, too quiet for a team deep in the middle of a groundbreaking experiment. Yet something had changed just beyond her awareness. It started with simple things, conversations that repeated, not word for word but in pattern. It was a little too perfect, like a rehearsed script. She sat across from Dr. Patel, going over the latest probe data. "We need to run a final simulation," he said. "Yes," she replied, tapping her fingers to the console. "A final run." But she'd heard this exact conversation earlier that day. Not an hour ago, but before. The feeling crept in, thickening the air around her. She pushed it away, but it followed her all day. Déjà vu. Well, it was more than that. She wasn't just remembering this moment. She was reliving it. At first, she thought she was imagining things. But then, it wasn't just her. She caught a glance at Dr. Huang, who was turning to the team and giving the same report from the same data stream. And when Dr. Patel responded, it was almost like hearing the words they had just said earlier. And then she heard the unmistakable whisper in her mind. Time is not flowing forward anymore. The symptoms spread. Dr. Reeve, usually the most steady of the group, began to look like someone who had been to the edge of a cliff and couldn't remember how he got back. He would pause in the middle of talking like he had lost his place. His speech would stutter, his mind visibly retracing a step he had already taken. "The stars," he said, staring at the latest simulation output. "Have we seen these before?" His fingers hovered over the keys, uncertain, despite having plotted the same graph 3 times that day. "Yes," Dr. Patel said, shaking his head as though they were just repeating old data. "We have. But we should check the coordinates again." "No," Reeve murmured, confusion clouding his eyes. "Not these. These stars." His voice dropped. "They're different now." His gaze shifted to the screen, but he couldn't look long enough to focus. Every time he looked back, the image on the monitor felt off. It was looping, just like everything else. He had seen those stars before, seen the same configuration over and over, but each time they were slightly different. Slightly. The loop wasn't just in the data. It wasn't just in the system. It was in them. Conversations began to repeat. Events, even thoughts. The morning would be perfectly normal, and then something would feel off. A conversation would be picked up exactly where it left off. A thought halfway through would resurface, not as a memory, but as if it were being reproduced from the last time it had been spoken. The team couldn't stop it. Dr. Patel had a thought that grew in his mind, something he couldn't push away. We are repeating. He could feel the panic rising in his chest, as his own words reverberated in his mind. He wasn't just thinking it. It was like an echo, feedback from his own mind. The realization struck them all at once. They were trapped. Days passed, or perhaps it was hours. It became impossible to tell. There was no tangible way to measure time anymore. It didn't just stretch, it folded in on itself over and over. The walls around them began to shift, not physically, but in how they remembered the space. The room would feel like a familiar place, but then when they looked closely, they saw things that hadn't been there before, or had been there long ago. Lena and Patel sat at their monitors one evening, only to realize they were staring at a sequence they had completed 2 days earlier. The data was exactly the same. They had made the same adjustments, the same corrections. How could they have missed it? Patel's fingers froze mid-type. "No," he whispered, trembling. No, we're here again. This moment." Lena's mind felt like a hammer striking her skull. Her eyes shifted from the screen to the others. They all were stuck in the same cycle. Their minds replaying the same event over and over, each iteration drawing them deeper into the cycle, each one weakening their sense of when. Their conversation looped back, like a repetition without origin. They couldn't leave the moment, because they couldn't remember when they had first arrived. Their memories became fractured, eroded by the black hole's influence. Its distortion of time was no longer external. It had eaten them. The clock in the corner of the room, the only thing left to track the hours, began to blink erratically. Its numbers flickered, jumping forward then backward. A glitch in the fabric of time. Every time Lena looked at it, the time had shifted by a different increment. Sometimes it jumped by seconds, sometimes by hours, sometimes it just disappeared entirely. No one spoke, no one moved. They had become the observers of their own entrapment. What they realized next was the horror. Not the black hole, not its event horizon. It wasn't the pull of gravity or the collapse of time. The real horror wasn't in what they saw. It was in what they couldn't escape. The loops were not external. They were part of them, part of the team, part of the experiment. They weren't just trapped in the data. They weren't trapped in time. They were trapped in the memory of the black hole itself. As the final signal flickered into the system, a new realization grew. Time wasn't eating itself. It was consuming them. The more they tried to study it, the more they had become part of the black hole's cycle. Not as observers, but as participants in its endless loop. Ripple, fracture, a moment of clarity lost forever. They had already tried everything. They had run the simulations, isolated the variables, adjusted for time dilation, recalculated the gravitational fields. But nothing could break the loop. Every time they thought they were free, every attempt to send out a signal to disconnect from the black hole's influence only led them deeper into the paradox. Time had become an inescapable tide, pulling them under again and again. Dr. Khan stood in front of the console, staring at the cascading stream of data, her fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over the keys. Her team had come up with one final plan, a desperate measure. They would send a signal, a unique frequency pattern, straight into the heart of the black hole. A signal designed to trigger a reversal to break the loop. It wasn't about escape. It was about freedom. Freedom from the constant pull of repetition. Freedom from the suffocating realization that they were trapped in an infinite loop, never able to return to their own time. This was their only hope. The plan was simple. Send the signal. Wait for the data to return. And if it worked, the loop would be disrupted. But as the command was executed, something unexpected happened. Instead of the signal dispersing, instead of the expected feedback, a strange distortion began to unfold. The screens flickered. The lights in the lab dimmed, as if the very power of time itself was being drawn into the black hole. The probe's telemetry ceased transmitting. Then there was a sound. Not a rumble, not a shake, but a hiss like the slow release of air, as if something was being let out. And from the center of the event horizon, something emerged. At first, the team thought it was just a visual anomaly. Another glitch in the system. Another fracture in the data. But as they watched the distorted footage, it became clear. It wasn't an anomaly. It was a being. It didn't have a shape at first. Just a mass of shifting light and shadow. A swirling amalgamation of fractured time, like something caught between moments. It was a figure, but it wasn't. It was there, and yet it wasn't. Pieces of it appeared, then vanished, only to be replaced by others, as if it were constantly rewriting itself. The creature that emerged from the event horizon wasn't born of matter. It wasn't formed by any natural laws. It was a living echo, a being formed from the fragmented echoes of time itself. The broken moments of their lives, their failures, their attempts to escape, were now alive, reshaped into something otherworldly. The team stood frozen, their minds struggling to process what they were witnessing. Dr. Patel's voice cracked as he whispered, "What is that? What have we done?" The creature was beginning to form, piece by piece, as though it were solidifying from the chaotic fracture of their past. Its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, were pools of swirling darkness, deep and endless. There was no body, no face, just pieces of the past, stitched together in ways that defied physics. And it was growing, expanding. Dr. Khan turned to the team, but her words caught in her throat. The creature wasn't just a manifestation of their mistakes. It was alive, aware, and it was beginning to move. The lab filled with a deep, unsettling silence, broken only by the soft hum of the failing systems. Then it spoke. It wasn't a sound they could hear, but something felt in the air. A pressure, an imprint on their very thoughts. They didn't hear the words. It was as though their minds were being flooded with visions, flashes of repeated moments, their own failures, their own fears. The creature wasn't speaking, they were remembering. And then they understood. The black hole hadn't simply trapped their data. It hadn't just stored time in a loop. The black hole had preserved them, and in doing so, it had preserved their mistakes. All the moments they wished they could forget, all the decisions they wished they could undo, had solidified into something that now had form. The creature was not from the black hole. It was born from their own mistakes, from their own repetitive failure to escape. It was their own memory, broken, twisted, and brought to life in a new form. The horror wasn't just in the creature's existence. It was in the realization that the black hole hadn't just kept them trapped in time. It had kept them as prisoners of their own actions, not just within a singular loop, but across all loops. The creature was a manifestation of infinite repetition, a being formed from the fragments of moments that had never fully finished. The failure to escape, the failures to act. It was the cost of trying to break the loop. And now it was coming for them. Dr. Khan's heart raced. They had all assumed they were trapped in the black hole's influence, its gravity. But now it was clear that the true prison was their own actions. The black hole had never been a force. It had been a mirror, reflecting back the darkest parts of their own minds, their own fears, their own repetition. The creature reached out with its endless form, moving toward them with slow, deliberate motion. It wasn't a beast. It wasn't an alien intelligence. It was a corruption, a living wound in time itself. They had unleashed it. The team was not just facing a black hole. They were facing the very cost of unraveling time. And now they had to pay the price.